A confidential summary of the discussions between Prime Minister Theresa May and European Union leaders confirms what most people pretty much assumed. Brussels, since her Brexit plan was overwhelmingly rejected last month, Prime Minister Theresa May of Britain has repeatedly set off for Brussels, ostensibly to negotiate new terms for her country's departure from the European Union. Each mission has ended without a deal, or even a hint of progress, leaving baffled observers to wonder what, exactly, Mrs. May and European officials talk about in these get-togethers. Now, a confidential document summarizing a February 7 meeting from the European side has offered up an answer: nothing. After each round of talks, top European officials provide a private readout to senior European diplomats, who in turn transcribe this for their own use. A European diplomat provided the New York Times with a copy of his document, which is a mixture of direct quotes and commentary. A spokesman for the British government in Brussels had no comment. The readout shows that Mrs. May used the February 7 meeting with the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, to once again request something that has repeatedly been rejected: a time limit on the so-called backstop provision concerning the Irish border, which as it stands could keep Britain in the European Union's customs union indefinitely. Ms. May suggested there was a possible alternative, but apparently did not offer any details about what that might be. May did not explain what she meant by alternative arrangements to the backstop. Not at all, the document states. The summary reveals what many observers have long concluded, that for all the political rhetoric, talks between Britain and Europe have gone nowhere. The document underscores Europe's growing conviction that Ms. May has no proposal to resolve the current deadlock in negotiations and is too politically hobbled to propose one. The document paints a picture of an essentially fruitless negotiating process in recent months that is kept alive largely to buy time for Mrs. May's political brinkmanship at home. At this point, there is only room for discussion inside Britain, but not with us, the February 7 summary read, underscoring the conclusion that Ms. May's problems were domestic, political and unlikely to be resolved by talking to European leaders. After talking to Mr. Juncker, Mrs. May met Donald Tusk, President of the European Council. The document describes that meeting as mostly a repeat of the conversation with Juncker. Mr. Tusk encouraged Mrs. May to work with Jeremy Corbyn, the left-wing leader of the opposition Labour Party, to forge a compromise. But Ms. May replied that, while the two had been in touch, members of her own Conservative Party were unlikely to get behind any of his ideas, according to the summary. Mr. Tusk suggested that, whatever deal Mrs. May envisioned, she should build support for it in London before asking leaders of other European nations to support it. That would avoid a repeat of last month's spectacular defeat, in which Parliament roundly rejected a Brexit deal that Mrs. May had brokered with Europe. You should get a vote or do a deal with Corbyn first, Mr. Tusk said. According to the document, May barely reacted. The document states, experts said Mrs. May's ambiguity was somewhat strategic, reflecting a difficult political position. Whenever the government writes anything down or gives any details, it produces a negative reaction, said Tony Travers, professor of government at the London School of Economics. So the great beauty of having an unstated, ambiguous position is it keeps everybody on side back in London. The result, he said, was that Ms. May went into negotiations without a position and without anything to request. She's saying, I need you to give me something. Tell me what it is, Professor Travers said. But time is running out. Britain is scheduled to leave the European Union on March 29, and business leaders, economists and other experts warn that leaving without a deal on trade, borders and other issues could be disastrous. With no support for the withdrawal agreement she brokered, and no sign that she can negotiate a better one in the next few weeks, Mrs. May has few options. Opposition party members have accused her of stalling for time, gambling that lawmakers will ultimately back her deal when faced with the prospect of either no-deal Brexit or no Brexit at all. Many European officials also see that calculation at work. The document obtained by The Times concludes that Ms. May's visit was essentially a stalling tactic. The visit was just to win time, because content-wise it was nothing.